My name is Louise Rauckhorst. I've been married to Ronald Rauckhorst, who wrote the book we're going to be focusing on today, and we had 50 happy years together. You know, he wrote his book, I think, because he wanted to share with people how he grew up in a very conventional Roman Catholic family of German descent and was taught to be obedient above all things, and he went into the priesthood, I think, because he felt he needed to do that to be able to get to heaven. You know, he spent 10 years as a missionary priest. He did, I think if you read the book, you'll see he did very good work over there. But then Vatican II Council came along, and I think that opened his mind and heart to a changed view of his faith and the church. And some of the other, he was in the Maryknoll was the community he was in South Korea, and some of the Maryknollers didn't really go along with the changes that came along with Vatican II. And anyway, he sort of became angry about it all, and then that, I think, spurred him to feel like he left the priesthood. But in the process, then he had some Jungian analysis that helped him to see that he was not in touch with his feelings because of the way he had been brought up, and he was judgmental, and he had not seen that in himself at all. And I think these kind of life experiences opened him up a whole lot. Then we met. He had left the priesthood in the previous year. I had only been out of the religious community I was in for a month when we happened to meet at a friend's wedding. And the groom had been with him in Korea, in Maryknoll, and the bride had been in the same community that I had been in. I really felt, in a way, that we were saved for each other. But when we were sitting at the table after the wedding, and he asked me what I did, and I told him that I was teaching. What was I teaching? I was teaching nursing, and he knew that I was an ex-nun. It turns out that I was his 3 no-nos, because he felt teachers, nurses, and ex-nuns were all too bossy. But somehow that didn't matter anymore. So we actually were married 6.5 months after we met. I worked with him a lot on the book and helped to do the editing. And as I still have this example of one of the early drafts where I have pencil marks all over it, because I think I should have been an English teacher, or at least that's what I would have been if I could have afforded to go to college. Instead, I went into nursing. But anyway, I've got editorial marks all over it. It was quite a process, and he really just wanted to share his experience in the hope that seeing how his life experience had helped him to open up and become a more loving person, that it might help other people to do the same. He really came to just believe that the main purpose in life is to learn how to love God, to love our neighbor. And I think it really came through at the end of his life. It was amazing, I thought, that how people related to him. They just felt, I think they felt his goodness and his sincerity. That makes me, very proud of him and having been his wife. I think it's worth reading again because it's honest, it's interesting, it shows his sense of humor, and his spiritual growth and the struggles that he went through in life, and what he learned from them. I think stories are so important in helping us along. Sharing our stories means a lot more than purely, logical, intellectual discourse. I think stories are so important, and I think he felt like his story was important to tell. We had done the Korean adoption because Al had great respect for the Korean people, and it was one of the countries where you could adopt, young children. Now, they're biological sisters, so we were able to keep them together. And you can hear horror stories sometimes of adoptions and how they don't turn out well, but with our girls, we had a few rough spots along the way, but overall, it was just a wonderful experience. We were on the same wavelength spiritually and in our beliefs, as well as the importance of our relationship with God in our life. I think we just grew together, especially I think in retirement when we weren't so busy with work and bringing up the girls and things like that. That it gives you an opportunity to maybe focus more on spiritual things. We did a lot of spiritual reading and discussing of what we read. In this faith community that we belonged to, he would pick out things that were written by people like Richard Rohr or Diarmid Murchu and Matthew Fox and other more, I guess you'd say, maybe progressive spiritual writers, and select them for our faith community to discuss each week after we had the liturgy. I think it was just, we had struggles at times during our marriage. It's just, that's the way life is, but we always were able to work things out. I think his transition was more difficult than mine because the process of getting laicized from by the Vatican and all was much more involving, and the interviews he had to have at Mary Knoll before he exited. Beliefs can change as we get more understanding of God and reality. But faith I believe is our relationship with God, like Al did, because that's there. Changing our beliefs doesn't change our faith, which is our relationship with God. It helps me to have a sense, and I think it would help a lot of people if they could understand that, because I think the churches have been too much focused on dogma and doctrine and intellectual ideas, where the most important thing is relationship. I think the highlights of his life were his ordination to the priesthood. If you read the book, he talks about all the process of his 9 years of preparation for that ordination. And he was really into it, and he loved being in Korea, being a missioner. He did good work there. But I think meeting me was a highlight, and adopting our children was another really big highlight. Over the last 8 to 10 years of his life, he had increasingly severe heart failure, and then he developed mysterious symptoms which were very hard to figure out, and they finally decided it was an unspecified autoimmune disorder. Western medicine had nothing to offer him but prednisone, which caused his spine, some of his vertebrae to collapse. And so to get him off of that, I brought him to an integrative medicine specialist. And through being, a detoxified and being on an organic diet and a ketogenic diet, it all seemed to work to give him, some more good years. When he became less able to get around and needed to use a walker, and then later a motorized scooter, thank God we had enough, we'd enlarged the house, so we had enough room for him to get around in that. But he accepted those things very gracefully. Sometimes, like I've had friends who won't use a cane because they don't want to be seen, in public in a cane. Al was never like that. He just accepted it gracefully, and I think, again, it was because he was so in tune with himself and his relationship with God, and had such trust that really helped him to deal with it. What I liked most about him was his honesty, his sincerity. He really had a strong conviction that we needed to share a certain proportion of our what we had financially with good causes. And because I'd grown up in the Depression, and I think felt like some more insecurity in regard to financial things than he did. I found that difficult at first, but now I keep doing it in his memory, because I mean I'm into it now. I really understand the need to share. And I think one of the big problems in the world today is that people aren't connected. There's so much loneliness and separation and polarization. And so I think I can't go out and do a whole lot physically for these good causes, but I can at least do what I can in supporting the ones that Al and I decided we would support, some quarterly, some twice a year, some once a year. They're the types like the social justice and progressive, political causes that will, help people get elected that support what we believe in. Then we also support several of the Feed the Hungry type of organizations that just serve the poor and the sick and the abused and neglected people. We try to use, we looked up the charities on that Charity Navigator, to be sure we were giving to organizations that gave 90% or more of what's contributed to direct service to the, whatever they're about. Right now, I'm working on a second edition of this book, where I want to include some of my viewpoints and ideas and memories that I feel will kind of expand the meaning of the book. But I had started some chapters on my own autobiography, which I've kind of put to the side now. And the theme on that is something called Falling Upwards. Richard Rohr, a Franciscan priest, wrote a book called Falling Upwards. And the focus of it is like in earlier in life, like, you have to go to school and learn, you have to develop a career, marriage, family, or other vocation following that. And then you hit, retirement years, and you lose a lot of those roles and responsibilities, and your health can fail, and you don't have the functional ability you used to have, and you could lose friends and relations, and etc. So there are a lot of losses that can come along with getting older, but that also can open you up spiritually. And so that's what falling upwards means. The losses seem like a falling, but actually, if it opens you up spiritually, it's an upward trend.